with time, as you can see, but obviously I won't keep you away from your lunch. Please.
I just have a quick question about the language in the tool that you're using. So is it just English and comments in English that the tool can help you code and analyze, or is it all languages? Because quite a few videos that I've looked recently, that would have a combination of different languages, comments in different languages. So how does your tool deal with this kind of multilingual nature of YouTube comments that often is the case?
It's only the sentiment analysis that does any kind of content analysis of the text. So everything else works identically for all languages, but the sentiment analysis is just for English. So if you have, it can run in about 7 other languages as well, but it's a little bit of a faff to get it to process those other languages. But if you look on the CentiStrength website, any of the languages there, it can process the sentiment for those languages. Just so let me know if you want to know those.
Any more questions? Anyone? I had one, but it's better if you get away. Is that okay? I ask you what? This. Sorry. I'll ask you one. I think you've provided us with a number of great insights, and I think that there is a necessity for us to process a little bit of these insights too. But one thing I think you can tell us a little bit more, which actually did but also didn't in a way, is across the scope of both researching and teaching YouTube as a platform, and across the various projects you've worked on, which involve YouTube but also other social media, how do you think the sort of historical perspective of you as researchers of YouTube is changing over time, and has changed both in relation to the tools but also in relation to, as I say, you as people researching an object that has changed over time?
It's interesting in the sense that I think for a lot of the platforms that we do much more work on now in the lab, because we look at online visual culture, we mainly look at still images, but because Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms are now really putting a lot of emphasis on video and on live streaming, YouTube also becomes very relevant again to return to in that sense. If you're interested in what these other platforms are doing in terms of video, I think that, you know, for me, it's just something that continues to be really important. So video online continues to be incredibly important, and it's, you know, it's I think particularly in the last couple of years, such a huge growth area. So in that sense, I think YouTube is just incredibly important in that sense, and I think from a teaching perspective, I think increasingly for Twitter and Facebook, a lot of the posts that the students want to look at and want to analyze, they're media posts. So they end up looking at posts on Facebook that are YouTube videos, or they end up looking at video posts. And so in terms of teaching them those research methods, you know, this YouTube is just really fantastic in that sense. But YouTube is also, I think, incredibly important as a platform that is just embedded in lots and lots of other social media platforms. And I think one of the things when I'm teaching these platforms is also to get them to understand that just because it's technically wrapped up as a Facebook post, if the post is a YouTube video, you're going to have to go to YouTube. And again, that may seem super obvious, but again, for many students, it's not obvious that there is this kind of nested architecture, which means that a lot of the posts that you end up wanting to look at come from somewhere else. And that means that if the post comes from YouTube, maybe you have to go to YouTube, or you have to make a decision not to go to YouTube, but you have to then think about why you decided to do that. So it means that the structure of the data and the data around the post is often much more complex than we choose to acknowledge. Because if you look at a Facebook post, you might have to think about, okay, I'm going to look at everything that's going on in the Facebook post, and then also everything that's going on with the original YouTube upload, and you know, that kind of level of complexity and the nestedness and the ways in which this ecosystem is structured, I think that we're not yet that good at, I think, acknowledging that or doing something with that in a research context.
Thank you. Something
Yeah, I mean, I'm continually surprised by how little YouTube research there is, really. It's been a decade. YouTube has been the world's #2 website, a decade, and it's a phenomenally successful site, phenomenally successful. And so this means a substantial percentage of the world's population are using this site regularly, and yet there's comparatively little research about it, much less than Facebook, for example. And I think maybe the fundamental problem is that if you're studying YouTube, it's hard to get good information that's not on the YouTube site itself. And I think if you're doing for example, the comments in particular, the comments are a good source of information on the video, but if it's 1 in 1,000 people who view a video writing a comment, then it's hard to justify that as like good evidence about the topic of the video, because the self-selection bias is so high for that. But, and also, yeah, so we don't know about the people watching the videos that don't leave the comments. And so I think that means that it's hard to justify the research you're doing if it's not about YouTube primarily. So I would love to do research which is about dance styles, and how it's reflected on YouTube is the kind of the way we get the information. But it's hard to, it doesn't really make sense to do that. It makes more sense to study dance on YouTube, for example, as a phenomenon, and then you can justify the data that you've got, the evidence that you've got. A bit random, sorry.
Please.
I disagree that there's hardly any research on YouTube, but it is mostly small-scale qualitative stuff when you're talking about the actual content, for all of the reasons that you both rehearsed. And the reason that we have a whole paradigm of hashtag studies in the Twitter domain is because of the API and because of the relative accessibility of the actual content, which comes in nice short chunks of natural language, etc. So how far away are we from the mythical place where video processing and computer vision and so on will enable us to actually do something with the content in a meaningful automated way? Do you have any friends in high places in that side of computer science, Mike or Farida, who are doing exciting stuff that we should know about?
I mean, I don't know that much specifically about image recognition in video, but there is a huge growth in image recognition in still video, and I'm sure that there is a lot of work also in still images in video as well. But I think one of the real limitations of that kind of computational approach, and Mike might be able to elaborate further, is that a lot of what that premise is premised on is being able to identify specific objects and being able to label and say this is pizza or this is a cat, we think. So cats tend to be relatively easy to identify.
It's probably a cat.
Yeah, it's probably. I mean, the thing is, you don't need AI to say it's a high chance that it's a cat, right? So anyway, but I think for me the issue with those approaches is that they're a starting point and they might be able to help you in a particular way. And I think there are interesting advances. So we're about to start some work with the Food Standard Agency in the UK, who are doing, I think, interesting but potentially also work where you think, oh, what are the privacy issues involved in that? If you are able now through computer vision to recognize if food has gone off, for example. So if people are taking photographs and are posting them on Instagram of food that they're consuming, and computer vision has now developed to the extent where you can, from that, gauge nutritional intake and also the level of deterioration of meat, for example, I think we're talking about something else then. So it's the application of those techniques, and I think as a researcher, I would be more interested in why is someone taking a photograph of a hamburger and posting that, what does that mean, rather than it's a photograph of a hamburger. So it's about being able to, I think, do both, and then to try and think about where can those techniques really, really help you, and how can they help you, and then how you can you combine them. So, for example, one of the things that we're starting to do some work on is the combination of computer vision techniques and crowdsourcing. So to try and scale some of the kind of content analysis in order to, for example, identify images, this is specifically about the refugee crisis, where images, where people are holding up placards. So being able to identify a placard in a photograph is relatively easy for a computer to do, but being able to then see, is this about the refugee crisis, or is this a hashtag that's relevant for our research, is not so easy for computers to do, right? So that's when you say, okay, well then we throw that to the crowd and we try and combine. And then maybe there's a further layer where you say, okay, now we take a subset of like 1,000 of these kind of cleaned up images, if you like, to then do more in-depth analysis. And I think those things are really interesting, where you can kind of combine and see computer vision is really good for that. This is where the crowd is really useful, and this is where you really need domain expertise to be able to understand, no, actually that is not an image of this refugee crisis, or that's an image of, which country, or and so on.
Yeah, great example.
Further comment or question? Speaking of hamburgers, I think. But if you want to take a picture of the food we have outside here and post it.
Do not tag the food standard agency.
But we could identify the level of
Deterioration in lunch.
Well, before we can do that, please help me in thanking once again Mike and Farida. And also let me remind you that we have 1 hour for lunch, I think. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, and then we have the last parallel panel session starting before Sonia leaving.
Well, we've actually got 15 minutes
15.
for lunch now. Yeah.
50 minutes, yes. The next session starts at 1:30. Right. Thank you.